I walked up to you with a clipboard, handed you $100 bill, and said, "Sign this petition and I'll give you more money if you get your friends to sign too," what would you call that? Because that's exactly what Elon Musk's PAC is doing in Wisconsin right now. And we're calling it democracy. This isn't subtle. It's not clever. It's not grassroots. It's bribery. Just with a better font and legal cover. But here's the part that should really scare you. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. Elon Musk is paying voters. Donald Trump is pressuring law firms to rewrite their beliefs. Congress is trading stocks like Wall Street insiders with zero consequences. Joe Biden's family, they've built an empire on access. And now a generation buried in student debt is being told, pay the full amount or default. Every one of them claims to be fighting for you. Every one of them is profiting from the position you gave them. This isn't the fall of democracy, it's the sale of it, piece by piece, clause by clause, vote by vote. And if you think this is just about the politicians, it's not. We, the people, keep playing along. We defend our side's corruption, we justify it, excuse it, package it as strategy. We are not just victims of this system, we are also its sustainers. So today we're going to talk about how corruption has evolved, not into something more secret, but something more normal, more legal, more profitable, and far, far more dangerous. We'll look at Elon Musk's Wisconsin influence machine, Trump's economic coercion disguised as patriotism, insider trading in the halls of Congress, a student debt trap so cruel it punishes people for getting married, and the ruling that made all of it possible, Citizens United. By the end of this episode, I want you to ask yourself, am I angry because it's wrong, or only because it's their side doing it? Because the insurgency we need now is not against them. It's against the system they built and the parts of ourselves that keep defending it. Let's start with Elon Musk. Right now in Wisconsin, Musk's America PAC is offering $100 to any voter who signs a petition opposing so-called activist judges. Not only that, if you refer someone else and they sign, you get another 100. Let that sink in. This isn't a donation. It's not a campaign ad. It's a cashback loyalty program for political influence. And the most chilling part? It's not illegal. Because the system doesn't just allow this. It was designed to allow it. Here's the context they don't want you to think about. That same Wisconsin Supreme Court, the one Musk is trying to stack with this stunt. It may soon rule on a lawsuit Tesla has pending in the state. This isn't theoretical. This isn't abstract. This is corporate influence targeted at a judicial outcome. He's not just buying attention. He's buying the conditions for a favorable ruling. But we don't call it bribery. We call it petitioning. Because if you wrap a cash transaction in the language of civic engagement, somehow it stops being corrupt. Let's pause right there. Petition, from the Latin petitio, a request or entreaty to authority. Historically, a tool for the powerless to challenge power. Today, it's a tool for billionaires to simulate public support with a cash incentive. That's not grassroots. That's AstroTurf with $100 bills woven in. And it's not just Wisconsin. Back in 2024, Musk floated the idea of giving away $1 million per day to voters in swing states during the presidential election. Let me say that again. $1 million per day, with the goal of influencing elections, not through persuasion, but through incentives. This isn't new for him. It's a pattern. The man who claims to be defending democracy is gamifying participation for profit. But here's the harder truth. We let this happen. We treat money like it's earned credibility. We see wealth as wisdom. We reward manipulation if it benefits our side. And we tell ourselves, well, if the other side had thought of it first, they'd be doing it too. Maybe they would. But what does that say about us? If your first reaction to a blatant cash for influence scheme is to calculate how it helps your ideology, you're not fighting corruption. You're just fighting for a turn at the wheel. And that's exactly how this system survives. So ask yourself, if George Soros paid $100 for every conservative to sign a petition attacking right-wing judges, would you still call it activism? If not, then maybe it's time we stop calling what Musk is doing democracy and start calling it what it actually is. Now let's move from billionaires buying influence to former presidents demanding compliance. Earlier this year, Donald Trump went after one of the most powerful law firms in America, Paul, Weiss, Rifkind, Wharton and Garrison. Their crime? They had DEI policies in their hiring and mission statements. Trump publicly warned any law firm promoting DEI would be blacklisted from serving a future Trump administration. Let's stop right there. That's not campaigning. That's not opinion. That's economic coercion aimed at reshaping corporate values through political threat. It's using access to power as a weapon, and it worked. Shortly after Trump's threat, the firm scrubbed its DEI language. No resistance, no clarification. They folded. Then came reports of a $40 million pro bono commitment to causes aligned with Trump's agenda, and a $75,000 donation to a Trump-linked legal fund or campaign apparatus, depending on who you ask. Coincidence or compliance, bought with silence. Let's be honest about what we're seeing here. This isn't about whether DEI is good or bad. This is about a political figure demanding ideological loyalty in exchange for future opportunity. It's cancel culture, with a checkbook and a threat. It's power, policing belief through financial pressure. And once again, it's not illegal. Because the rules aren't written for the people on top. They're written by them. Now here's where we lose the thread as a society. If Joe Biden had done this, if he had threatened a Christian law firm over anti-DEI language and then received $75,000 a week later, the right would be screaming fascism. There'd be hearings, headlines, hashtags. But when Trump does it, it's leadership. It's draining the swamp. It's holding elites accountable. Except he's not holding elites accountable. He's just making sure they serve his version of power instead of someone else's. And once again, we excuse it, because we agree with the outcome, because we don't like DEI either, because we'd rather win than be principled. And that is how the system uses us. Again, here's the pattern. Musk uses money to pull support toward him. Trump uses power to push people into submission. And both tactics work because we reward them when they own the other side. But this isn't owning anything. This is mutual corruption wearing different team jerseys. And the longer we pretend it's different because it's our side, the longer the game goes on. With us still stuck in the stands, cheering for people who wouldn't even buy us a hot dog. Let's pivot now, from billionaires and political influencers to the lawmakers themselves. Because while we're busy arguing about left versus right, they're quietly trading stocks behind closed doors, based on information you'll never see until it's already too late. We're not talking about shady speculation. We're talking about lawmakers buying and selling stock in companies they directly regulate, often right before legislation drops that affects those companies. It's called insider trading when anyone else does it. But in Congress, it's just Tuesday. Let's run the highlights. Nancy Pelosi's husband Paul has made millions trading tech stocks, Apple, Nvidia, Alphabet, often right before regulatory debates hit the floor. It's legal because he's not a public official. Former Rep. Aaron Chris Collins, convicted, used insider info to help his son avoid massive losses. He went to prison, one of the few who actually got caught. Steve Bayer, arrested in 2022 after trading on a pending merger. Tom Price, Trump's former HHS secretary, invested in biotech, then pushed policies that benefited those exact companies. And in 2022 alone, 78 members of Congress violated the Stock Act, the one law that's supposed to prevent this. Their punishment? Maybe a $200 fine. You'd face federal charges. They face paperwork. Now here's where we, the public, come in. Because we know this is happening. There are websites tracking congressional trades in real time. There are even ETFs, investment funds, modelled on politician portfolios, because they outperform the market. That means Wall Street has figured it out. But the people? We mostly just shrug. Because if it's not our politician, it's not our problem. Let's talk about that phrase, insider trading. Legally, it means trading on material, non-public information. But politically, it means voting with one hand and trading with the other. And yes, that's still insider trading, just legalized by proximity to power. So here's the question. If 78 members of Congress can break the one law designed to stop insider corruption and face no real consequence, do we actually have a law at all? Or just the illusion of one? Designed to pacify the public and protect the players? Because at this point, calling Congress a lawmaking body is generous. It's starting to look more like a financial advisory firm with a side hustle in legislation. And while we're out here arguing about bathrooms and beer commercials, they're passing bills and cashing in. One last thing. If you think this is a Republican problem, you're wrong. If you think it's a Democratic problem, you're still wrong. It's a system problem. But more than that, it's a people problem. Because we know, and we're still not demanding change. So the game goes on. Let's talk about one of the cruelest tricks this system plays: student debt. It starts with a promise. Go to college, work hard, sacrifice now, you'll be fine later. But here's what just happened. The Trump administration pulled the rug out from under borrowers, cancelling income-driven repayment plans, freezing applications and shoving millions into full repayment schedules they can't afford. But when that rug came up, it didn't reveal solid ground. It revealed a pit, a debt pit, dug deep over decades by predatory policy, false promises and bipartisan neglect. And now, they're shoveling dirt on top of us, burying people under compounding interest, wage garnishments and the quiet shame of falling behind. And here's the kicker. This wasn't incompetence. This was intentional policy. Dismantle the Department of Education. Hand the loan system over to the Small Business Administration, an agency with zero infrastructure to manage it. The result? An entire generation, already buried, now told, pay full freight or default. No negotiation, no mercy. But it doesn't stop with the borrower. Because if you're in a relationship, if you're trying to build a life with someone, getting married means your partner's income becomes a target too. Love becomes liability. Marriage becomes a financial risk. And then Republicans have the audacity to ask, why aren't people getting married anymore? Maybe it's because you destroyed the foundation and then blamed us for not building on it. And Democrats? Let's not pretend they're heroes. Maybe they wouldn't have cancelled income-based repayment outright, but they've held power multiple times, and somehow, every time they find a way to protect the lenders, not the borrowers. This isn't the failure of one party. This is the design of a system that sees education as debt, love as leverage, and silence as consent. We were sold the American dream and handed a shovel. You might be asking yourself by now, how is all of this legal? How is it legal for billionaires to pay voters? How is it legal for presidents to threaten law firms into ideological obedience? How is it legal for members of Congress to day trade around legislation? The answer? Citizens United. Or more accurately, what that ruling unleashed. Let's rewind. In 2010, the Supreme Court ruled in Citizens United vs. FEC that corporations and unions could spend unlimited money on political messaging as long as it wasn't directly coordinated with a campaign. The logic? Money is speech. And corporations are people. So limiting political spending would violate the First Amendment. That decision supercharged super PACs, dark money networks, and anonymous mega donors hiding behind LLCs and shell orgs. But that's not the worst part, because while we were all arguing about free speech, something else happened. Corruption didn't go away. It just adapted. It put on a suit, it filed the right paperwork, and it became legal. Here's the real trick Citizens United pulled. It gave elites the illusion of righteousness. The power to say, I'm not bribing anyone. I'm just exercising my constitutional rights. But let's be honest. If you need to spend $30 million to express your opinion, maybe you're not speaking. Maybe you're just buying everyone else's silence. Let's talk about that phrase. Money is speech. If money is speech, then only the wealthy get to speak loudly. The rest of us, we're stuck whispering, hoping someone listens before the next commercial break. And here's the part too many people miss. Citizens United didn't just protect money. It distracted us from everything else. While we were focused on the billionaires writing checks, Congress was trading stocks. Presidents were enforcing loyalty. Courts were building walls around themselves and calling it ethics. This wasn't just a legal shift, it was a moral rewrite of American governance. And if you're wondering how we got here, this is how. Citizens United didn't start the fire, but it built the firewall around it. And unless we tear that firewall down, no amount of outrage, no petition, no protest will matter. Because the corruption won't be punished, it'll be protected. So after all this, Musk's cash for petitions, Trump's corporate coercion, Congress's insider portfolios, and the Citizens United firewall protecting it all, you might be thinking, okay, but what the hell do we do about it? Because let's be honest, outrage is cheap. Information is everywhere. And still, nothing changes. Why? Because we're still playing by their rules, and a system built to protect itself won't let you vote your way out of it. And that's why I said it earlier, provocatively, carefully. We need to start thinking like insurgents. Let me define that clearly. When I say insurgent, I don't mean violence, I don't mean chaos, I don't mean storming buildings. I mean something harder. Non-compliance with corruption, strategic defiance of deception, a refusal to play a game rigged against truth. Because let's remember, slavery was once legal, child labor was once legal, denying women the vote was once legal. Legality is not morality. It never was. It never will be. So when the system tells you bribery is just campaign finance, insider trading is just savvy investment, and political threats are just leadership, you have every right to call that out for what it is. Not illegal, but immoral, undemocratic and unsustainable. And here's where it gets harder. Because it's not just them. It's us. We perpetuate this when we excuse our side's corruption and scream about the others. We justify Musk because we like his politics. We excuse Trump because we hate the alternative. We dismiss Pelosi's trades because everyone does it. We downplay Biden's access because it's not as bad. And that's how power wins. Not with tanks, not with violence, with our silence. So here's the call. Stop excusing your side's corruption. If you wouldn't let the other side get away with it, neither should your own. Start demanding reform where it counts. Local races, transparency laws, ethics commissions with teeth, support parallel systems, independent media, civic networks, voices that don't answer to ad dollars or party lines. Reclaim language, call bribery, call coercion what it is. Call your fellow citizens to more than tribalism. Call them to truth. Because the system, it only survives when you keep playing. When you stop marching to their tune, you start composing your own. And the next time someone tells you the game is fair, ask them who wrote the rules. We've spent this episode exposing the corruption that is woven into the fabric of our system. Billionaires buying influence, political leaders coercing loyalty, and the legal framework built to protect these interests. But before we close, we need to do what neither the media nor the government is doing. Question ourselves. Because the moment we stop questioning our own assumptions, we become just another mouthpiece for a narrative. And the world has enough of those. So, let's ask ourselves the hardest question of all. Are we too comfortable with this system? Have we been so conditioned to think that this is just how things work, that we no longer see the injustice of it? Even as we rail against Musk's PAC or the power moves of Trump and his allies, how often have we excused actions on our own side because they align with our ideals? How often have we let the ends justify the means? And when we celebrate a victory, do we stop to ask at what cost? If we're really honest, do we treat corruption on our side any differently than we treat it when it's the other side? The moment we accept that it's okay for one side to break the rules because we think we're winning, we're complicit. And the moment we start justifying corruption, no matter the side, we become part of the system we're trying to fight. But what if we're wrong? What if we're missing something? What if we're failing to see the bigger picture? Where is the evidence of accountability? If the government is taking steps to limit corporate power or suppress harmful speech, why is it these actions seem to only affect certain groups while others get a free pass? If this system is supposed to serve the people, then where is the transparency, and who is really benefiting from these changes? Because if we demand honesty from the system, we must also demand honesty from ourselves. If we want to dismantle corruption, we must be sure we're not replicating it in our own actions, no matter how righteous the cause may seem. And that means questioning ourselves, our beliefs, and our assumptions. So what needs to change? What does real accountability look like? First, we need to stop excusing corruption for the sake of victory. We need to be willing to call out wrongdoings, even if they align with our side's values. Second, we need to hold ourselves to the same standard we expect from others. If we demand transparency from the government, we must be transparent about our own biases. Third, we need to stop treating people or corporations as heroes or villains based on their political affiliation. We need to see things clearly and fairly, and that requires us to always ask, are we really fighting for justice, or are we just fighting for our side to win? Because at the end of the day, the truth isn't about ideology, it's about what's real. The truth isn't convenient, it's uncomfortable, and we'll never find it unless we're willing to challenge everything, even our own assumptions. This has been episode 2 of the Socratic Inquiry Project, where we pulled back the curtain on a system that doesn't just tolerate corruption, it's built on it. This isn't dysfunction. This is functioning exactly as intended, for the people it was redesigned to serve. But the question we'll explore next is maybe even harder. How do they get away with it? How do they keep you distracted while they rig the game? How do they make you feel like you're part of something righteous, while they empty your pockets and rewrite the rules behind your back? Simple. They divide you, and they get you to fight. Next week on SIP, we're looking at the weaponization of resistance, how protest becomes violence, how violence becomes justice, and how language becomes the weapon that makes it all look moral. We'll ask who gets to be called an activist, who gets labeled a terrorist, and how both sides of the political spectrum have learned to justify their mobs while condemning the others. Until then, think critically, speak precisely, act with integrity, and remember, if your revolution only works when your side breaks the rules, it was never about justice, it was just your turn.